Yo, what is up guys, your boy IzuKage here with the movie for What If Deku Was Loki. So it's finally here and I really don't have much to say except merch link and Discord link in the description, and I hope you all go on to enjoy the What If.
Talk to me nice, look, dirty, big body Benz, I got you. Scoop on the kick, get in like a Mac. I can't fuck with these hoes, these bitches is true. I'm in the middle, got niggas attack.
So we start this what if off at the death of Loki by the hands of Thanos. He snapped Loki's neck and dropped him to the ground dead. But something some of you may not know, but Loki technically can't die. He manipulated Hela, the goddess of death, into taking his name out of the book of Hell, allowing him to be reborn, but something Loki didn't expect was to be reborn in a completely different dimension. And because of this, Loki wasn't born in the normal sense. Only his mind and all his physical attributes were transported into the My Hero world, to Izuku specifically. And this is a regular Monday morning. Izuku was just about to wake up for school and a bright light shot from the skies directly onto Izuku's house's roof and going through the roof into his body. And that was the only indication of what happened. There was no sound, nothing. So Izuku, he wakes up, but this is no longer Izuku. Loki gets up and he starts feeling his arms and chest, rush to look at a mirror next to Izuku's bed, and then he sees he's in this kid's body with green hair and green eyes and looks no older than possibly 9. At first, Loki was shocked, but he remembered what happened. He remembered, his neck being snapped like a twig. But before he could go through all his memories, Loki's a couple thousand years old, so there's a lot to go through. Izuku, well, Loki in this case. Also, I'll be doing that a lot during this. I'll be calling him Izuku one second, then Loki the other second. Just know Izuku, Loki, it's interchangeably, just like Izuku and Deku. So before Loki could go through all of his memories, he heard a voice call out his name, said, "Izuku, hurry up, breakfast ready." Loki froze. He didn't know what to do, and he started hearing footsteps coming closer towards the door. Then he remembered, oh wait, I have shape-shifting abilities. So he tried turning himself into something small like an ant, but it wasn't working. Nothing was happening. Then Inko opened up the door and saw Izuku just standing there, and she puts her arms on her hips and said, "Didn't I tell you to come downstairs?" And Loki kept quiet. He thought his voice, would be the same as, his old body, like Loki. Then Inko said, "Well, come on," and tried lifting him off the ground. But as she did, she starts lifting Izuku and dropped him immediately and said, "Oh, what are you eating? You're as heavy as a rock." And she started breathing heavily and walked downstairs with Izuku following closely behind. So Loki thought back to one of his fights with a frost giant and how heavy they were, so it only makes sense for him to be as well. And since he's in his tiny body, he's more dense. So Izuku right now, he's above 200 pounds and is 7 years old and still as skinny as he is in canon. So Loki, he came back to reality when he saw a buffet in front of him. Inko went all out for this breakfast because the school called Inko and told her about, a bullying incident that happened the other day. So she's trying to cheer Izuku up, and seeing all of this food, Loki's stomach was growling. And he quickly grabbed a fork, but it slipped from his hand, and as it fell, Loki tried grabbing it again but missed. But it stopped in mid-air, and Loki looked at the fork and thought, so it seems some of my powers are coming back. So he uses telekinesis to float the fork back into his hand. But before Izuku could dig in, Inko saw all of this and was frozen. She dropped her plate out of her hand and ran over and tackled Izuku to the ground, rubbing all over his face, saying she's so proud of him and, saying they have the same quirk. And Loki, not knowing what she was even talking about, thought she was trying to attack him or something, but Inko got up and hugged him again and said, "I'm so proud of you, Izuku. After school, we're definitely going to the quirk doctor." and Loki was confused, but from everything Inko has said so far, this world's humans seem to have powers called quirks. And it seems the body he took over didn't have a quirk. So with this information, Izuku finished up his breakfast and Inko took him to school. The entire ride, Loki was trying to see what abilities he has and doesn't have, and it seems like he just needs to wait for them to return. So he's not really too worried. So at school, Izuku would walk into class and saw one empty desk, so I mean it's kind of obvious where he sits. And surprisingly, Bakugou, or anyone else for that matter, didn't really mess with him. They were all preoccupied, but that didn't last long. As soon as they got recess, Bakugou and his goons surrounded Izuku's table and started calling him all sorts of names. Normally, Izuku would break down in tears because, I mean, he is only 7, but Izuku was just chilling and Bakugou said, "Are you hearing us, you Deku?" and got really close to Loki's ears, and Loki got tired of Bakugou's constant chatter, and he came, and when, Bakugou came close to his ear again, he headbutted Bakugou with the side of his head, and Bakugou stumbled back holding his forehead, and his goons went to see if he were okay, but Bakugou said, "Stop, I don't need any of your help." And he regained his balance and eyed down Izuku and started walking towards him. Loki said, "From the way you were acting, you'd think you'd be stronger. I guess the dogs with the loudest bark don't bite." And Bakugou got angry and said, "Don't mess with me," and reached his hand out to Izuku and set off an explosion bigger than anything he's ever created before, and it shocked Bakugou himself. A massive amount of pain shot through his arm, and meanwhile everyone else in class was just staring at this. Some girls started screaming in horror saying, "Bakugou, you villain, you killed Izuku!" And more people began running out of class and out of fear. And when the smoke finally cleared, Izuku's skin on his face was completely burnt, peeling off. On the side, Bakugou set the explosion off, and Izuku's hollow eye socket turned to look at Bakugou and said, "Nice shot." And Loki's entire face began healing itself, returning it to its normal look. And Bakugou was now shaking in fear. Loki got up, which made Bakugou, step back a bit and fall onto the ground. Izuku looked over Bakugou and said, "Don't mess with a god." And he walked off. Everyone, Bakugou, his goons, all the other students were in complete shock. Even students from other classes who came to watch when they either heard the explosion or their friends called them over. And they were just shocked by Izuku's newfound power. And when he walked out of class, people made a path for him. He is truly divine. For Izuku's entire time at school, no one dare talk back to him, no one dare step up to him, no one dare go against him. The teachers would even go to Izuku for help, and Izuku was acing all of his classes. Loki made it a sport to get an easy A, especially in knowing perfect English, which these people seem to be so amazed by when it really isn't a problem for him. Since you guys may not know, but Loki can speak any language, even alien languages. And sometimes he forgets he can even do it, to be honest. But other than that, Loki had been doing a lot of research into the world he's now in, and he learned about heroes and villains, All Might, and what being quirkless truly means for someone. Basically everything we know about the My Hero world, but some more, because Loki's intellect, you can't underestimate Loki's intellect. I mean, he's the god of mischief. You can't be dumb and be mischievous, especially when the people you're playing a joke on are borderline gods. But anyways, Izuku, he would realize that, All Might's quirk, it's so interesting. It seems to be popping up during the height of other heroes like Nana Shimura. The quirks aren't the exact same but have the same quality, and actually it seems like All Might's own is stronger. He really doesn't know what any of this means, it's just an observation he made, but he's really wondering what's so special about All Might's quirk, especially that he's keeping it hidden. So, I mean, he doesn't really think too long on it, and it's about the time of the last day of Izuku's time in middle school. So Izuku, he would walk into class, and instead of going to his seat all the way in the back, he tells to a girl, he's like, I want this seat, and she doesn't even think twice. She packs up all her things. She's like, okay, Izuku, and like goes to the back, and he sits down, and the teacher looks at Izuku, and he's like, I mean, that's Izuku for you. But he goes on to say that, this is the last day of school, and he's really proud of everyone, making the effort to be top heroes. And he was going to hand out some job application tests, but who cares, because he knows they all want to be heroes. And everyone, hearing this, they start using their quirks, getting really excited. And the teacher, feeling this excitement, he throws the papers up into the air. And Bakugou, he is looking at everyone like, all these side characters aren't gonna make it anywhere. And people look at Bakugou, he's like, stop being such a loser, Bakugou. And he's like, who you're calling a loser? And then another kid chimes in and says, yeah, Bakugou, shut up before Izuku comes down here and beats you up. And Bakugou, hearing this, is like, damn Izuku. So the teacher, he's, starting to take up the papers, but Izuku, he just uses his telekinesis and puts them into neat stacks. And the teacher, he's surprised because this is the first time Izuku's showing off this ability. And this just cements the fact that Izuku truly is something else. And the teacher knows it, everyone else knows it, but Bakugou just can't accept it. But anyways, the teacher goes on to say that he actually sees a few people applying to UA, and he starts counting the names, and it's like almost everyone in the class. And Bakugou, he's shocked by this. But the thing is, Izuku, his, I would say, like, quote unquote, overthrow of Bakugou's rule, because Bakugou truly did, like, rule everyone in the class. Like, he could make anyone do whatever he wanted them to do. And Izuku really showed people that Bakugou really isn't anything to be feared, so they all want to try their best and be, the best heroes they can. So most of them did apply to UA. And Bakugou, he's had enough of this friggin' like circus. All these clowns think they can make it to UA, and he exploded and said, you damn clowns aren't making it anywhere. But before he could finish, Izuku used his telekinesis to lock Bakugou's jaw into place, and he said, Bakugou, just be quiet. And everyone in the class began laughing, having a good time, and Bakugou just couldn't do anything. He just sat there in silence. So the teacher continues his lesson for the day. They don't really learn anything new, just review a few stuff. And by the end of the day, he dismisses everyone. And when Bakugou was leaving class to go home, Loki came up from behind him and said, Bakugou, you know what, I actually wanted to say I'm sorry. I didn't think everyone would laugh at you, I didn't mean to humiliate you. And Bakugou was surprised Izuku would even mention it. Bakugou over these years has truly been feeling sorry for how he treated Izuku when they were younger, and went to shake Izuku's hand, but he phased right through it and the illusion disappeared, and Bakugou saw Izuku snickering to himself as he left the building. And come on, Izuku, he's the god of mischief. We had to have him, play a prank on somebody. But the Bakugou we know would explode from anger, but after being humiliated for years, he's toned down a lot and just grabbed the straps of his bag and started walking home. Izuku meanwhile just teleports home, so the whole sludge villain incident gets resolved by All Might, and there was a different kid that got captured by the sludge villain, so he doesn't cling on to All Might's leg, so none of that happens. He just takes the sludge villain to the station. It's clean and simple. So during the 10-month training period, for the first month, Izuku decided to see what villain life was like. Yeah, he applied for UA, but remember, Loki doesn't have some heroic nature, he just goes with the flow most of the times. So Izuku goes to walk out of the front door and tells Inko he'll be out doing some, training. He just makes up something. And Inko, she doesn't mind and says, buy bread on your way home. So Izuku nods and walks outside and makes his hair and eyes gold and made himself more buff, think like Ida's build. And Loki thought, so my shapeshifting is coming back. I still can't morph into completely different creatures, but this will do for now. And Loki starts walking to the bad part of town. This area is known for organized crime, and any heroes who patrols this area ends up going missing, so most stay clear of it. Izuku, he's taking a stroll down the street when he sees two guys mugging this old lady, and he walks up to them and says, "Hey guys," and the two muggers flip around and say, "Hey, don't come any closer," and points their knife towards him. And Izuku says, "Calm down, I'm one of you." But the mugger wasn't buying it and said, "Come any closer and I'll kill this lady." Izuku laughed and said, "You think I care about some random lady's life? She looks like she's about to kick the bucket anyways." And the other mugger said, "Well, how do we know you're not a hero?" And Izuku sighed and said, "Would a hero do this?" And he used his telekinesis and took the knife out of the mugger's hand and sent it through the old lady's chest. And the two guys were shocked, actually scared of Izuku's ruthlessness, and ran away. Izuku sighed and said, "You can go home now, Granny." And from the alleyway beside Izuku, the old lady, the two guys held up, walked out and said, "Thank you for saving me, young man." Izuku had actually used an illusion to fool the guys that he killed her. And Loki started walking, he got bored after a while, and he kept coming across small-time villains, no one with a real reputation. So he's going to have to use his trump card. And Loki ran into an alleyway behind a dumpster and transformed into All Might. And he said, "Now this'll do." This transformation only gave Izuku All Might's appearance, so Loki had to use illusion to make it seem like it was actually him, his powers and such. So Izuku, he jumped from the sky and smashed the ground beneath him when he landed and said, like All Might usually does, "I am here." The thugs around him started running, not wanting to be caught by All Might, but something Izuku didn't think of is about the arrival of the real All Might. It was around nighttime, so All Might was going to the town to catch some bad guys, and that's when he saw himself. All Might walked closer to Loki and said, "Are you some villain impersonating me?" And Izuku, Loki turned around and seeing All Might decided to run because, all his strength isn't back, and he knows he can't take All Might. I mean, he could, but he doesn't want to kill All Might. So Izuku tries jumping away, but All Might is in quick pursuit, like he's on his tail. And Izuku kept running, and his stamina was damn near limitless, something All Might didn't have. Actually, quite the opposite. His stamina was cut in half. So after about 20 minutes of chasing, All Might's lungs gave in and began to ache from his injury, and he couldn't go on. And by this time, Izuku saw that he got away, so he transformed back into his original form and teleported to the shop near his house and grabbed bread, he can't forget, Inko asked, and walked back home. For the 10 months, Loki did a lot of research on the existence of the Infinity Stones and if there were even any in this universe. And for this, I'll put it up to you guys in a community poll if you want me to, bring in some stones in this. So Loki decided to just wait for more and more of his abilities to return to him. And 2 months before the entrance exams, Loki saw how Inko had a lot of financial concerns, and when he thinks about it, he's actually never seen her have a job. So that day, Loki was in his room and thought to himself, "I think a bank would do," and he changed his facial features and height, then teleported to the Mustafo City Bank to get a few stacks. I'm actually not 100% sure how comic Loki's teleportation works, but in this, I'll have Loki, all he has to do is have a clear image of the place he wants to go in his mind, and he teleports to it using his sorcery. And since he doesn't know how the inside of the vault looks like, Loki conceals his presence until the next shipment of money comes in, and after closing hours it does. 2 armored trucks pull up to the bank and start unloading pallets of money into the bank's vault, which takes about half an hour, but when they were finished, the bank manager locks up for the night, leaving the bank all to Loki. And he teleports into the vault and starts stuffing bags of cash. Then he would teleport home, then teleport back to the vault, kept stuffing and stuffing until the vault was almost completely cleared. And Izuku went home with almost 11 million yen, which is about 10,000 USD. And to be honest, it would be suspicious that when Inko hears about the news of a bank robber that she starts receiving a large amount of money, but Loki already knows this and devises a way to give her the money without raising too much suspicion. he would plant letters in her mailbox every week saying it's from Hisashi, saying, he's sorry for leaving her and Izuku and will keep supporting them. At first, Inko was mad and wanted to burn the money, but she really needed it and, she had no other streams of revenue, so she accepted it. And soon, Inko was getting Loki, for the most part, whatever he asked for, a new PC so he can watch IzuKage on YouTube. He got some IzuKage merch and even joined IzuKage's Jonin membership role for exclusive what ifs coming soon. But apart from, watching his videos, Loki was getting ready for the entrance exams, but I'll get into that in the next. So we start this what if off with Loki having a few months left until the entrance exam, but these months are pretty uneventful with Loki just waiting around for his abilities to finally return, and by the time the entrance exam comes around, most of them do return to him except his ability to make force fields and energy blasts. So it's the day of the entrance exams and Izuku, he gets up and gets ready. He puts on some regular clothes he would work out in, grabs some breakfast, and Inko gives him a massive hug, and then he heads out for school. Izuku simply uses his teleportation to appear right in front of the UA gates, and surprisingly no one saw him. They weren't paying too much attention, so Izuku just walks up and goes inside the UA building. He doesn't trip. Like, why would Loki trip? Why would a god trip? So he goes into the building and immediately he's met by Midnight, one of the hero teachers there, and she is instructing everyone to go and take a seat to start the written portion of the exams. So Loki, he sits down, he's gonna play fair, so he doesn't use any tricks to get around these exams. He just sits down, does it like a regular person, and then after that, they do a quick, they mark the test almost instantly. As soon as you submit it, it's marked. So the people who got above 90%, they get to move on. So after finish up the written portion, Izuku does extremely well. He is top of the top. He gets 99%. There was a few questions in there that slipped Izuku up, but he wasn't too worried about that. So he walks into this massive lecture hall and he's looking around and sees a lot of familiar faces from his old school. A lot of his classmates decided to take a shot at entering UA. So since everyone was grouped together by the school they attended, Izuku took a seat next to his old classmates, and they were all super hyped to see Izuku. They were he was the reason they applied to UA. And it's almost been a year, so they have a bit of catching up to do, and these were the only people that could make Loki have a lot of fun. He was really chill around them, but something they all realized was Bakugou was nowhere to be seen. Izuku chuckled to himself and said, I guess he got the hint that he's weak, and they all heard this and start having a good laugh about it. But let's actually switch and have a flashback 9 months later to Bakugou leaving school. He's walking down a pretty dark alleyway, which is a really good shortcut. It cuts off 10 minutes of walking to his house. So above him, a dark figure says, he'll make a great addition to the team. And in front of Bakugou, a purple portal opened, and this guy with a weird head, he didn't seem human, but he had on a tuxedo. He walked out and instructed Bakugou to enter the portal. Bakugou, he was immediately defensive and he said, or what? I'm not entering any damn portal. And the man who is, is Kurogiri, he says, or I'd have to force you in. And Bakugou said, you're not forcing me anywhere. But before he could even attack or anything, from below him a portal opened and he fell into it and into a room. It was like a jail cell from a police station. But Bakugou, he tried blasting his way through the bars, using explosions, but they weren't working at all. And soon he heard footsteps coming closer and closer. And Shigaraki, he came out and showed himself and said, oh, so you must be Bakugou Katsuki. And Bakugou is like, what do you want from me? Oh, nothing, but I have a proposal that you can't refuse. Shigaraki began to explain his plan to Bakugou that he can become way stronger than he is and defeat those that stand against him. And Bakugou, he wasn't buying it, but You know, Shigaraki, he brought in someone that had multiple quirks from All For One, one of All For One's test subjects. It's sort of a borderline Nomu, but he's still sentient, like he can still think for himself. And this man demonstrates his ability to use air and wind. Just think of like the Avatar, basically. And Bakugou, he's looking at this and he's amazed. Like, this guy, if he starts refining his quirk, like training, he can become a serious powerhouse of a hero. But Bakugou, he obviously doesn't want to become a villain, so he's thinking of a way to get out of this. So Bakugou, he would start getting the trust of Shigaraki, saying, okay, he'll think about it, you know, this is something he would want to participate in. So he would get Shigaraki's trust, you know, Shigaraki would think he wants to become a part of them, and he would eventually bring Bakugou to All For One. So while all of this is happening, Izuku is still in the entrance exams, and he just entered the gate before the mock city. You know, they're just waiting for the gates to open, and Izuku, he's sitting in the back corner just waiting because it's been a while. He's just waiting for everyone to enter before they can start. And Izuku, he sees this girl looking really nervous, and he's decided to go and calm down her nerves. So he gets up and starts walking over, but this guy with purple hair blocks Izuku, or well, Loki, and Ida says, "Where do you think you're going?" Izuku just points to Uraraka and said she looked worried, so I was gonna help her out. And Ida said, "Like I believe you." And Loki's like, "Bro, what's your problem?" And Ida just says, "Back off, I know you're trying to ruin her chances of getting into UA." Izuku at this point was really confused, like, what is this guy even talking about? So Izuku just leaves himself there, but it's an illusion, while his actual body goes over to Uraraka and starts, you know, giving her some words of confidence, saying, you know, she's probably gonna do really good in the exams. And Uraraka, she cheers up a little bit, you know, this doesn't do much, but it definitely helps her. And soon enough, President Mike gets on the intercom and he says, "There are no countdowns in a fight, go, go, go!" So Izuku runs off, and Ida, who was still talking to his illusion, he realized that like it wasn't real because it just disappeared out of nowhere, and he turns around and sees everyone running out of the gate. And Ida, he's like, damn it. So he boosts off with his engines on his legs, and he like catches up to everyone. So Izuku, he follows the group for a while, and then he turns down a narrow street. And at the end of it, he sees one of the robots. It's a two-pointer, and he's ready to take it down. But something I should mention really quickly for those who need a bit more clarification, because how you're used to magic working is maybe they're using runes or spell books, or like saying something before they cast a spell, like Raven, you know, she's like Azrat Methri, I can't remember. But yeah, Izuku, all he has to do is concentrate, because Loki's magic, it's that easy. He just has to think about it. He inherited the ability. So with his mastery so far, he has to do barely any concentration for his ability to work. So Izuku, well, Loki, he's going to use his physical augmentation, and what this does is temporarily augments his body, you know, his different attributes like speed, strength, and he's going to make his strength as fast and as strong as Prime All Might. This won't last for very long, maybe 10 minutes at most, but that's enough time for Izuku to rack up a bunch of points. So Izuku does this, and his body starts growing to the size of All Might because he can't contain that amount of power within his stature alone. So Izuku, his body starts to grow and buff up, and he runs at the two-pointer, and with just one step, he dashes and jumps up into the air and punches through the chest of the two-pointer, and this causes it to drop down. So All Might and the other teachers who are watching from the observation room are seeing this, and those who know about All Might's quirk are wondering if he already like passed it on. Like, what is this? He never told them about anyone with his quirk. And All Might, he's saying he doesn't even know who this kid is, but he is incredible. So they keep on watching Izuku and watch as he's going around taking down robots with literally zero effort. So Izuku, he racks up 300 points in 5 minutes. Far greater than All Might's record, because when All Might did this, yeah, he did have 100% of One for All, but he didn't have any technique to it. He didn't know how to use it without exerting too much effort. So after 10 minutes, Izuku had racked up 532 points, and the physical augmentation wore off, and he was extremely tired because that takes a toll on his body, so he has to rest for a bit. And he's just sitting on top of a building watching everyone go around trying to rack up some points. And Izuku, he took down most of the robots, so Nezu, he had to release some more robots into the area to make it even fair. So after 15 minutes of Izuku just chilling, because no one is gonna make it to where he is, let's be honest. So Izuku, he's chilling this entire time, and after, as I said, 15 minutes, everyone's starting to exit, but he's hearing these loud thuds like a giant stepping. And this, of course, is the 0-pointer. Izuku, after that, starts hearing screams of students in the area. They're screaming, trying to get away from this robot. So Izuku, he gets up and starts looking around, trying to figure out where the sound is coming from. And then he sees it. This massive robot, taller than all the buildings around him, coming closer to the exit. And Izuku, he jumps down, like he levitates down, like he can levitate. And he goes around and tries helping people who like don't run as fast as everyone, and he just teleports them to the exit and then teleports back and starts helping people. And this actually helps him rack up some hero points, so it's gonna be way more than just 60 hero points. Izuku, after doing that, he hears this girl screaming, and it's the same girl Izuku tried pep talking earlier, the girl with a short bob hair and it was brown. So he goes over and lifts the massive boulder off of her, and Uraraka, she's breathing heavily because like she was running and then this fell on her. So she was disorientated and she could have just easily used her quirk. But at that point, her mind was racing so fast she didn't even think about it. So Izuku, he lifts Uraraka up bridal style, and she says, "Oh my god, thank you for saving me." And then Loki says, "Don't worry about it." So he teleports back to the exit gate, and Izuku, everyone was there. Like, he didn't have to go out and do anything else, but, he wanted to flex his abilities a little bit. So he teleports back down to the 0-pointer where it was. And Izuku, he's standing in the middle of the streets waiting for the 0-pointer to come closer, and inevitably it does. And when Izuku is almost about to get crushed by the 0-pointer, Nezu, he's about to press the button to disable it, and that's when Izuku stops it using his telekinesis, and then he puts both his arms out in front of him and slowly starts pushing them together, and with that, the 0-pointer starts being crumpled. And Izuku, he doesn't have to do this, it's just, cool for him to do it. He could have just thought of it and it just crushes almost instantly. But Izuku, he wants to put on a show to show that he is, really strong. So he starts closing his hands and soon it locks his fingers together, and this crushes the 0-pointer into the size of a tennis ball. But this tennis ball was as heavy as like 10 cars. So like not any and everyone could just pick it up. And the students, Nezu, the other teachers who are watching this, they were like, "What is this kid? How is he this strong?" So after that, Izuku, he exits, and they're just in like disbelief of Izuku's power, really. And he walks back to the exit gate, and everyone, they start clapping for Izuku. Like, that was pretty impressive. So Izuku, he walks out the door to exit the mock city, and then after that, he just teleports home. And when he gets home, Inko, she's excited because she already knows how great her son is. So she's like, how did it go? And Izuku, he's saying, it was alright. He more than likely passed. And this is just Loki trying to be humble because he's seen how people see heroes and he kind of wants to not fit that mold because that's just not Loki. But he wants people to feel more comfortable around him because he wants to sort of take up this heroic act because I mean, I didn't mention it, but over the 9-month training period, he had a lot of time to think. And he's been getting all his memories back and thinking about his brothers and all the thing that he missed out on because he wasn't a quote-unquote hero like Thor and the other members of the Avengers were, and that basically led to his death. So Loki wanted to change some stuff up, change up how he is to people, change up his almost entire personality, but of course it's not going to be completely perfect. So during the week before Izuku would get his UA acceptance letter, All Might and Nezu go to one of the hospitals to look up Izuku's file and see what his quirk is. And when they look into the file, they see it listed as telekinesis. And they're confused by this because that strength that Izuku displayed, that was not just telekinesis, that was something more. That was like one for all levels of strength. So they would have to dig a bit deeper, but Izuku doesn't have much about him. It says he was quirkless for like up until he was 7 and his quirk bloomed late, so maybe that had something to do with it, but that's really all they could find. So to get information, they would have to go to Izuku directly. And that's what they did. So a week after Izuku's exams, he got a knock on the door, and this was about time for his letter to arrive. So Izuku was thinking that this was just like the postman delivering the letter. So he goes to answer the door, and when he does, he's looking straight and he just sees this guy's chest. So he looks up and realizes that it's All Might because All Might is tall as hell. He looks up and sees All Might, and Loki, he's surprised, and All Might says, "Young Midoriya, I've come to deliver your letter." So All Might, Izuku, he allows All Might to come in, and when Inko sees All Might, she almost passes out like, "All Might, what are you doing in my house? Do you need some tea? What do you need?" And she's asking him like whatever he wants, he can get it. And All Might, he chuckles and says, that's okay. I'm just here to, give Izuku his letter of acceptance to UA." And hearing this, Inko starts getting really excited. He's accepted into UA. She's going nuts. Like, she is so excited for Izuku. So All Might, he sits down at the table and he shows Izuku the letter. It wasn't a disc this time, since everything the disc is gonna say, All Might is gonna say personally. So Izuku, he gets a letter. And when he reads the letter, it just says, thank you for participating in the entrance exams. You have been accepted. The usual college acceptance stuff, yada yada yada. So All Might, he begins to talk to Izuku, a more friendly tone, and he says, "So, your quirk was pretty amazing in the entrance exams. What exactly was it?" And Izuku, he doesn't want to give anything away to All Might, and he just says, "It's just a simple telekinesis quirk." And All Might is like, alright, well, how would you explain, like, he's not trying to sound confrontational, like he's interrogating him or anything, but he's like, "Well, how did you do all of that cool thing? You were flying around punching all the robots. How is that possible with a telekinesis quirk? That's incredible." He's trying to sound as friendly as possible. And Loki says, "Well, that's what my telekinesis allows me to do. It sort of makes me stronger in a way." And All Might, this is making zero sense to All Might. Yeah, All Might is not the smartest, tool in the shed, but this just makes zero sense. But All Might, he doesn't want to pry too much, or he's pretty sure Izuku would start getting suspicious. So All Might says, "Oh, well, that's cool. I'll see my way out." So All Might gets up and exits Izuku's house and goes back to UA, where he tells Nezu that he really didn't get any information and that Izuku said it was just all his telekinesis quirk, which even to Nezu, that just makes zero sense, bro. Like, what? There has to be something more. So fast forward a week and it's time for Izuku to start at UA. Izuku, he gets his uniform ready and he goes into school, and he doesn't have a problem finding his classroom because he read the little handbook, so he knows where all the facilities of the schools are. So he makes his way to his classroom, and as soon as he opens the door, he sees Ida just sitting around. Like, the class is actually pretty peaceful. Ida is sitting, everyone else is sitting. They're having a little conversation with each other. So Izuku, he sits at the very back of the class next to a window. And some of you might be wondering, where's Bakugou? Well, he's at the LOV, their hideout, and he has gotten a quirk from All For One. And Bakugou, he isn't planning on joining them, he's planning to use the power he gets from All For One to fight against the LOV. But I'll keep the quirk he got secret for now. So we're back with Izuku, and he's in class sitting down, he's listening on everyone's conversation, and Uraraka comes into class and she sees Izuku and she wants to go up to thank him, but as she was about to, Aizawa comes up from under the desk and he says, "Can you all be quiet? I'm trying to get some shut-eye." And everyone's looking at Aizawa like, who is this guy? Does anyone know? And everyone's looking confused, and Aizawa's like, I'm gonna be your homeroom teacher. So he takes out some eye drops and puts some in his eyes, then continues his lesson and says, well, not a lesson, but he's, talking to everyone. And he's saying that they'll need to go outside for a quick quirk apprehension test. And Uraraka is the first one to, say, don't we have like an assembly to go to? And Aizawa, he starts spitting some truth that everyone who goes to those assemblies, they gain nothing. And when you're a hero, your time is the most precious thing because people's lives could be on the line. So you want to make sure that everything you do is for the sake of those you're protecting. And everyone's like, oh, damn, that's some truth. So they all agree and they get their PE gear from the back of the class. They get their own personal suitcases and then go to the changing room where Mineta, he still tries to peep on the girls, but Jiro pokes him in the eye with her headphone jacks, and that deals with Mineta. So everyone gets changed and they go outside, and immediately Aizawa is like, I want Izuku to come up and show everyone how far he can throw because he got the most points in the entrance exams. And when Aizawa says the amount of points he got, everyone thinks he's joking. Aizawa says he got 653 points. And everyone is wondering, like, how is that even possible? Like, what kind of quirk does he have? So Izuku, he goes up to the this little circle area that Aizawa drew out, and Aizawa asks what was the furthest he threw in middle school, and Izuku says an average number, actually below average. He says like 25 meters. So Aizawa hands him the ball and says, throw it, but this time use your quirk. And Izuku says, okay, so he reels back and, puts some elbow grease into it and he throws the ball. And this time it goes soaring through the skies because Izuku augmented his arm strength to be that, almost ×2 of All Might Prime. I know I keep saying All Might's Prime, but it's sort of the best calculation for, this in the My Hero world. So All Might's Prime is what? I think he said 7 times what he is in the anime right now. So times that by 2 again, and that's what Izuku has. So definitely, this is getting close to Planet Buster levels. It probably already is. So Izuku throws this ball out of the atmosphere to Mars, maybe even further. Izuku just chucks the ball way further than the monitor that Aizawa has to even track it. So it goes out of the planet's atmosphere, and Aizawa, he's looking at the monitor and he can't comprehend the numbers he's seeing. It goes so high to the fact that it fries the chip on the monitor and it breaks. So Aizawa, he says, yeah, you went out of the atmosphere, and everyone is wondering, how is that even possible? He just threw it. It wasn't like a quirk like zero gravity where obviously it will go out of the atmosphere. And the person the most amazed was Uraraka. She was surprised. She thought she was the only one who was going to get a number like that, but wow, she has to give props where props are due. So they go on to do the other events in the quirk apprehension test, like side-to-side lunges, 50-meter dash, long-distance run, all those things like that. And at the end of it, Izuku is by far the best student at everything combined. He is #1 overall, and if it was like a gap, Izuku, he would be way further than second place. Second place, it's not close. So second place comes out to be Momo, third Todoroki, fourth Ida. So after finishing up all of these tests, everyone goes back, they change back into their regular school clothes and go through the day like a regular school. They learn English, they learn math, the regular subjects you'd get in school. So after that, everyone returns home, but the next day at UA, normally it should be the hero versus villains, but this time All Might isn't at school. He has some important business, so Aizawa, he decides to do the USJ early. So he, he does this beforehand. He talks to 13 and she's okay with it, so they decide to do the USJ. So this day of school goes by like any regular day, but at the end of it, Aizawa mentions to the students that they need to get their parents' permission to go on the USJ. And when people hear USJ, they're thinking Universal Studios of Japan. We're actually going, but Aizawa is quick to correct them that it's actually the unforeseen simulation joint, which is where heroes train to save people in different situations, like in floods, in burning buildings, in snowy mountains even. Everything you can think of, it's in the USJ. And this surprisingly made everyone even more excited than Universal Studios of Japan. So when they go home that day, everyone gets permission from their parents, and even when they said no, they begged and begged and begged, and eventually everyone was able to go to the USJ. So come next day, and there's buses outside of the school ready to load the students up, and they head in. And on the bus ride to the USJ, everyone's having fun, they're talking about each other's quirks, but the biggest mystery among all the everyone is, what is Izuku's quirk exactly? Because they don't know what it is, because he seems to have some sort of super strength, yet people who were in the same like mock city as him saw him use telekinesis and saw him float. So they are really confused what Izuku is, and he isn't willing to tell anyone, which is weird. Like, they're thinking it's weird, you can just tell us anything, but Izuku isn't like that. So the bus pulls up outside of the USJ, and Ida is the first one off and says, come out like single file lines. So everyone, they exit the bus, and like Ida says, they all form a line and enter the USJ. First things first, when they enter, they see the space hero 13, and 13 starts talking about the importance of getting your quirk under control, because if you don't, it could actually kill the person you're trying to save. And while she's explaining all of this, Uraraka is gushing over her favorite hero. She's telling Izuku, oh my god, I love 13, I've loved her ever since I was a child. It's sort of the same obsession that young Izuku had with All Might that Uraraka has with 13. So after they're finishing up, they start going down the stairs, and it's a huge flight of stairs. Like, people are honestly starting to get tired, but as soon as they reach the bottom of the stairs, these different portals start opening up, and villains start coming out of them, and Kirishima is the first one to ask, weren't we just supposed to do hero training? Why are there actual villains? And Aizawa is like, well, this isn't a part of the plan. And he instructs everyone to go up the staircase, and while he deals with the situation and tells 13 to to get the students together and get them through the door to go back to UA. But when 13 and the students reach the top of the staircase, a huge portal opens up, blocking it off. So Loki knew what he had to do. He's trying to play hero. So first things first, Izuku uses one of his abilities to contact UA, and it isn't electrical, so it won't be, cut off. He uses his psionic abilities to telepathically send a message to Nezu in UA. So Nezu, he's like sitting in his office reading through some papers of the schedules of all the classes, and then he gets a vision of Izuku in his head, and Izuku starts explaining their situation at UA, and after he's done, it disappears. And Nezu, he has to take this seriously. It could have been a joke, it could have been this, but he wants to make sure. So he gets all the heroes together and sends them all over to UA, the USJ, especially because he isn't getting any message from Aizawa, and he can't contact him, so that's really suspicious. So he sends all of the hero teachers over, And in the meanwhile, Aizawa is taking down these heroes with relative ease actually. Aizawa, you would think his quirk wouldn't be suited for fighting, but his scarf makes up for a lot of the slack that his, quirk is missing out on, like his fighting abilities. So Aizawa, he's starting to take down villains while everyone is watching, but Loki, he's starting to get bored and decides to jump in. So he teleports down to Aizawa and everyone sees him teleport and they are surprised again, like what can Izuku not do at this point? So he appears next to Aizawa and he's surprised as well, but he's preoccupied with taking down these villains. So Izuku, he gives him a helping hand and enhances his speed and strength. Not too strong, but enough where he can take down most of these villains with a couple punches. So after around 2 minutes, they take down everyone around them, and Shigaraki, he's starting to itch his neck and getting infuriated, and he says, "Kurogiri, bring out the Nomu. These guys are cheating." So a massive portal opens up the size of All Might and out steps this purplish black creature with a bird-like beak and these sharp claws. And Izuku and Aizawa are looking at this thing like, what is it? But because the UA teachers were called early, now they all appear and bust down the door. And this, makes Kurogiri's portal disappear. And these teachers, they come in and snipe. He starts shooting at the Nomu, shooting its legs, and the Nomu, it's getting irritated, so it immediately rushes for Aizawa. But then All Might jumps in and blocks the punch that he was about to send Aizawa's way, and they start getting into the fight from canon, Nomu versus All Might, which is personally my number one fight from My Hero. It's my favorite fight. Just Yusei Run works so well. Oh my god. Let me stop before I start ranting about the song, but it's amazing. So after the Nomu gets punched through the ceiling and gets sent flying like Team Rocket blasting off again, Loki, he's been a bit busy. He shapeshifted himself into one of the bodies that, he and Aizawa took down. And he shapeshifted into that person and he slowly got up like, he was one of them. So as Shigaraki and Kurogiri were using a portal to teleport away, Izuku, he runs to them and says, "Boss, I'm alive, I'm alive." And Shigaraki turns to Kurogiri and says, "Alright, send him back to the HQ." So Kurogiri opens a portal for Izuku and he walks through. Izuku's plan for all of this was to get more information on the LOV, but he was in for way more than he signed up for, because as soon as he came out of the portal, he saw Bakugou at the bar, drinking. And he's wondering, so this is where Bakugou has been this entire time? He's affiliated himself with the villains? So we start this what if off where we left off last time, with Izuku going through one of Kurogiri's portals and ending up in the LOV's hideout. And when he arrived, he sees Bakugou just chilling at the bar drinking some orange juice. And Izuku, he tried acting natural, since he's still in disguise. So Shigaraki, he walked up to the counter and slammed his fist against it and said, "Those damn heroes, I'll kill them all." And Bakugou was just sipping his orange juice like, "Chill out, bro, it's not that deep." Shigaraki then turned to Bakugou and said, "I think it's about time you got some villain work done around here. And we'll see how that pyrokinesis quirk treats you in the real world." And Bakugou, hearing this, seemed happy on the outside, but soon realized that this is going to be the perfect time for him to escape. So yes, Bakugou's quirk that he got from All For One was a pyrokinesis quirk. So later that night, while Bakugou is settling into bed, Izuku, still looking like his villain self, like the body that he transformed into at the USJ, he snuck into Bakugou's room and Bakugou said out loud, "Who is it?" And then he made a fireball in his hand. And Izuku lifted his hands up and said, "I'm not your enemy." And Bakugou, him seeing Izuku, he went off guard and said, "Oh, you. I heard you were the only survivor apart from Master and Kurogiri, of course." And Izuku didn't say anything but came closer to Bakugou and said, "I know you're not really a villain." And Bakugou said, "Huh? What do you mean?" Then Izuku started communicating with him telepathically and begins to explain how he's actually Izuku and he's come to take these villains down. And Bakugou was completely taken aback by this. He wanted to fight Izuku right here and now. I mean, that's what all of this is about. That's why he spent months working under these villains just to get a one-up on Izuku. But Loki, who's able to read emotion, says, "You can beat my ass later," pause. "But right now, we need to get out of here." As they were talking, Shigaraki walked into the room and said, "Hey, what are you doing in here?" And Izuku froze and turned around and said, I heard a loud noise, so I came to check it out." And Shigaraki was suspicious, but that's the same reason he come up here, so he said, "Alright," and walked out. Izuku soon followed behind him, and let's fast forward to the next day, with Shigaraki, Kurogiri, and Bakugou all gathered at the door ready to head out. And Izuku, he came into the room still transformed and said, "Hey guys, what up?" And Shigaraki said, "What do you want?" And Izuku responded, "I thought I was coming with. What happened?" But Shigaraki, he's confused. He's never said this to Izuku. He said, "No, you're staying here." And Izuku turned around and said, "Oh well, I was leaving anyways." And Shigaraki was confused, like, "What do you mean by that?" And Loki disappeared, and in this confusion, Bakugou used fire to wrap flames around Shigaraki and Kurogiri, stopping them from moving. Then Izuku reappears and says to himself, "I hope this works," and he concentrates deeply. Then a bluish force field surrounds both Kurogiri and Shigaraki, and Izuku smiled and said, "You two are gonna be gone for a while. See ya." And they disappeared from the room. So we switch scenes to a high security prison like the one All For One was locked in, and Kurogiri and Shigaraki appear in a quirk cancelling cell. So when the guards eventually realize who these people are, they would get locked into, proper prisons, and they would tell this to different hero agencies saying these high level villains have been captured. So back to Izuku, he says to Bakugou, "Good work," but Bakugou scoffs and says, "Ugh, like I needed your help." And Izuku waved him off and said, "Sure you did," and laughed. And Bakugou said, "Who the hell are you laughing at?" And he threw fire at Izuku, and the fire acted like a whip and wrapped around Izuku, restraining him. And Bakugou walked up and said, "With my new quirk, I'll finally be able to beat you." And Izuku said, "Sometimes it's funny how dumb you are." And Izuku fades away into thin air, leaving him alone in the bar. And Bakugou screamed out Izuku's name in anger. And Izuku is just outside walking away, just smiling. So because of the USJ attack, the school is put on break for a week, but when the students finally return, Izuku and the others are sitting in class when Aizawa actually announces the arrival of a new student. And in walks Bakugou. Aizawa begins to explain how Bakugou has been captured for 9 months by villains, so, they should treat him kindly, yada yada yada. Bakugou, he just made up some story. So when he went to sit down, he sat really close to Izuku, and Izuku turned around in his chair and said, "I didn't expect to see you in here this soon." But Bakugou, he kept to himself without even giving Izuku a glance. So the day goes on, and after lunch, Aizawa, he's supposed to be in class to teach the students more about history. That's the subject they left off on. But when it came lunchtime and lunchtime was over, no one was in class. Well, except the students. No teacher was in class. But that's when All Might came into class and he said, "Coming through the door like a normal person." And he goes up to where Aizawa would usually teach the class, and he begins to speak that Aizawa had some important business to attend to, so he left him in charge of his class. And everyone was actually excited to see All Might teaching them, because they heard it before, but they didn't think it was real. They thought it was just some rumor someone made up. But they would come to soon hate Aizawa because he left All Might with a test for them to do. And when they heard this, they're like, "Oh my god, typical Aizawa," to be honest. They shouldn't have been surprised. So All Might instructs them to get their hero gear, which, opens up, the walls open up to reveal their briefcases with their names on it. And they all grab it and go to the lockers to change. So everyone meets up again at the observation room with All Might, and Izuku, he's looking around, and all these hero suits, they're pretty cool, but not as cool as his. Izuku is wearing sort of a royal gown similar to what Loki would normally wear on Asgard. Bakugou, seeing what Izuku is wearing, he chuckles and says, what are those horns on your head? Are you a goat or something? And Izuku just remains quiet and just hopes that he's gonna go up against Bakugou to finally show him once and for all who's the strongest. So, Ida asks Izuku, how are the teams gonna be chosen? Is it random? Is it based on their quirk power? And yeah, he says it's completely random. I'm gonna be drawing from a box, and Ida is like, okay, there are definitely smarter ways to do it, but you do you, All Might. So he picks from the box, and the first team to go up is Bakugou and Ida versus Izuku and Uraraka. And Bakugou, hearing these matchups, oh, he can't wait. He says it's clobbering time. And if you guys don't get that reference, then I honestly don't blame you. Most of the movies for that series aren't that good, and most people don't read comics, so yeah. But anyways, onto the battles. So Bakugou and Ida, they enter the building first, just to set up everything they need for their villain defense. And while they're doing that, Izuku and Uraraka, they plan their strategy. And Izuku, he's just letting Uraraka talk. She has out this paper of the blueprints of the building. She's marking areas that they should probably go and cover. And Izuku is like nodding his head like, like he's listening. And while she's finished explaining, Uraraka is like, got that? And Izuku says, no. Yeah, there's a really easier way for us to finish this. I just teleport in, touch the bomb. It's that simple. And Uraraka is like, wait, you can teleport? But before Izuku could explain any further, All Might said, now it's time for the hero team to move in. So Izuku, he says, I'll explain later. And Uraraka, she's following him into the building saying, no, it's important, just tell me now. And as he's about to go up one of the stairs, he just disappears from in front of her. And Uraraka is just standing there alone like, oh my god, this guy. So Izuku, he teleports up to the bomb room, but Bakugou this time knew of Izuku's teleporting abilities and what he might do. So he appears in the bomb room, and Bakugou is like, I knew it. And he tells Ida to keep running around the bomb so he knows that Izuku can't get it. And he as in Bakugou and Izuku start getting into a fight, with Bakugou using his pyrokinetic abilities to launch flames around Izuku, stopping him from moving anywhere. But as soon as Bakugou thinks he hasn't captured, Izuku just disappears. And he reappears behind Bakugou and punches him in the back, and this sends him flying because Izuku's punches are really strong. Izuku kept playing around with Bakugou, and Uraraka finally made it up, and she looks into the room and sees 6 different Izukus surrounding Bakugou, and Uraraka said, just get the bomb already. And one of the clones turned around to her and said, why don't you do it? It's all yours. So Uraraka, she runs up to the bomb, but Ida was still defending it, but not for long, when one of Izuku's clones got into a fight with him, leaving the bomb completely wide open for the hero's swift victory. So All Might comes over to the intercoms and says, hero team wins. And with that, they all return to the observation room, and All Might, he has a few tips or advice for the people that just went, like the heroes and villains. He says how Izuku, he needs to be more efficient and stop playing around with the villains, or else they could have, something else in store for him. While Bakugou, All Might said he's too hot-headed and he should have a clear mind when fighting, or else it could end up bad and him losing the fight altogether. So after all the critique was finished, all the other students went to have their fights, and they got some critique as well. But soon they all finished and returned to classroom, with Aizawa there waiting for them, and he was observing this entire time, and he had his own sort of advice for the students because he knows them more than All Might, so he knows how he could change them and make the advice that All Might gave them stick even better. So, after that was all said and done, at the end of the day, Aizawa told the students about the upcoming sports festival, and they were all interested in this because the way how Aizawa was explaining it is because this is what everything they've been doing thus far is leading up to. Everything they've trained for, their powers, just this is where it comes to fruition. Basically, they'll be scouted by heroes to join the hero agencies, and this is where they can build their hero career. So the students took no time off for the 2 weeks leading up to the sports festival. They trained both mentally and physically, becoming the peak versions of themselves. And for Izuku's training, he would normally do some light reading as soon as he wakes up. And for the entire day, not do much else because Izuku, he's been using these powers, well, Loki, he's had these powers for thousands of years. So there really is no refining to be done if we're being realistic. While someone like Bakugou, he completely trains his physical body. He gets a gym membership and starts pumping iron every single time he can. And not only does he do that, he doesn't forget about his quirk as well. He trains that too. And he would normally go to a nearby forest or something, which is, let me just say this now, a bad idea when you have an explosion and a pyrokinesis quirk. But he made it work, and soon enough Bakugou and all the other students in 1A were ready for the sports festival. So we fast forward to it, and everyone, they come into this huge arena, and people in the stands, they're cheering, they're excited for the match to come because no sports festival in any of the previous years has not been entertaining. So everyone looks forward to this, kind of like how people in the real world look forward to the Olympics or something like that caliber. So the students are lined up, and Midnight, she is talking to everyone in the crowd, getting them really excited for the events to come. And then she calls upon the class representative for 1A, and this being Izuku. So he starts walking towards the podium where Midnight is at, and everyone from the different classes, some of them are impressed by Izuku's ability. Well, they don't know it yet, but he has to be strong to be considered class representative. That means he got the most points in the entrance exams. And some others are looking at Izuku with sort of hatred, like, who does this kid think he is? Just because he has some special quirk, he's getting this treatment. So Izuku, he goes up to the podium and he starts speaking to all the students and the people in the stands. And the thing notable that he says is that he is going to win. And he's not saying that as being confident, he's stating it as fact. So Izuku, he hands the mic over to Midnight, and everyone, well, not everyone in the stage, but the people who are the different students, they're angry at Izuku like, oh, how are you supposed to declare that you win when they haven't even started? Oh, you're so cocky, yada yada yada. But Izuku just walks back to his class and just chills with them, and soon enough, Midnight, she starts choosing the different obstacles that they're gonna face. First off is the obstacle race, second is the Calvary Battle, and last, she doesn't pick this but it happens every year, is the 1v1 battles. So she has everyone go to the first stage, the obstacle race. So they all get ready, some go back into the waiting area to get changed because they were still in their school uniform. So once they do get into their PE gear, they head to this cave entrance sort of thing where everyone is piling in. There are a bunch of students in there waiting for the race to start. So as they're waiting, there's no sign that they're ready to go until President Mike comes over the intercom and says, "What are you waiting for? Go, go, go!" So as everyone was ready to run out, Todoroki, he touches the ground and this freezes the entire floor, trapping people in place, with only certain people being able to escape. Either he can melt the ice, completely break through it, or phase through it somehow, become intangible, sort of like Mirio. And Izuku, he just punches straight through it because it really isn't anything compared to his strength. And for the first part of the race, he wants to keep it fair before, he just completely wins. So he runs alongside everyone, and soon comes these 0 point robots blocking their way. And Todoroki, he does his usual flashy thing, destroying the robots with his ice, and he gets up and over, the first one passing them. Next was Bakugou, who just flew through using his explosions and his newfound firepower, and Izuku just running through, being covered with one of his force fields so they can't hit him either ways. So when they reach the tightrope that is over this massive cannon, Todoroki uses his ice and slides over while Bakugou again flies over it, and Izuku just starts teleporting. And when people realize that Izuku can teleport, they're wondering why he just doesn't go to the end immediately. Maybe he has a range limiter on it, maybe it's a time limit, maybe some requirement stopping him, but it only makes sense just to teleport to the end. But Izuku, he doesn't until they reach the minefields, and Todoroki, he's having problems with this section, so he starts freezing this sort of road that he can walk and it doesn't detonate. But Izuku, realizing that Todoroki, he's basically at the end, he says, I've had my fun, and he just teleports to the end and comes first place, winning the 10 million point headband. Well, not really winning, earning the 10 million point headband. And people watching, they're wondering why he didn't just do that from the start. It just doesn't make sense. And Bakugou, who's like, that damn Izuku keeps playing around. And Todoroki, he was surprised by this actually. So when it came to the Calvary Battle, everyone, they're still running in from the course, the race, and once they're all in, the leaderboards are made, and then they're told to just choose a team, choose whoever you want. There's no limitation, but the top 5 can't be on a team together. For instance, Bakugou can't be on a team with Izuku. That's just not fair. So Izuku, he wasn't trying to have anyone on his team because he knows they're probably gonna mess up. So who are better teammates than yourself? So Izuku, he makes clones of himself, 3 clones in fact, and they lift him up, so he's the rider while the clones are the ones supporting him. And Midnight, seeing this, is just like, I'll allow it, why not? So once everyone has their teams, Midnight starts the match, and Izuku immediately puts up a force field around him and his clones, and no one can get in. And because this is one of his weaker force fields, it can last longer. So how it works is, the stronger, more durable ones that can withstand most, if not any attack, those only last a few seconds. And those that are pretty weak, that if a nice combination attack like hit it, it would break, those can last for even days. So Izuku, he has sort of a medium one that's gonna last the entire length of the Calvary Battle, and Izuku just sits there and enjoys the peace and quiet while everyone is just in the stands like, this kid, he's so cocky, but they can't really say much because Izuku, he's definitely strong, and they probably want him in their hero agency. So after basically sitting out the Calvary Battle, after this they have some recreational games like treasure hunts, things like that, while everyone else who passed, they get ready for the next match. This is going to be the 1v1 battle. So they have lunch. Izuku, he sits with some of the few friends he've made. I wouldn't even go so far as to call them friends, just people he finds the most tolerance for in the class. They're not as annoying. And these are Uraka, Ida, and Kirishima. So they're eating together, and Izuku, he finishes pretty quickly. He didn't really do much, so he wasn't that hungry in the first place. So once he gets up, he goes over to the stands, and he takes this short hallway. But in the hallway, he comes face to face with Endeavor. And Endeavor, he's mad at Izuku for some reason. He says, "You aren't gonna beat my Shoto." And Izuku is looking around like, who asked? And Endeavor says, "Don't disrespect me." And Izuku is just saying, "Bro, I'm just trying to leave. You're the one arguing with a child." Endeavor scoffs and says it doesn't matter because you're just gonna lose whenever Shoto decides to use my firepower. And Izuku, he's getting sick and tired of Endeavor already. He's provoking him for, Endeavor's provoking Izuku for no apparent reason. So he says, "You know what, enjoy your stay at Mount Everest." And Izuku just teleports him to the top of Mount Everest. So he has that to deal with. And Izuku, he just goes to the stands and sits with his class until it's his turn to go up and fight the 1v1 battles. Izuku doesn't have to wait long because he is the first to fight in all of the tournament, so he is called up and his opponent is Shinso. So Izuku, he goes up to the fighting area and he sees Shinso standing there, and Shinso is giving him this smug look like he's better than Izuku or something. So Izuku walks up closer to Shinso and they're like not that far from each other. They can hear what the other's saying, and Shinso is saying, "You must be so proud of all your abilities." And Izuku, he's confused of what he's even talking about. But Shinso, he's jealous of everything that Izuku can do because Izuku can do so much, and to him, to what he thinks, is like he is comparable to being quirkless. He sees himself as worthless because when he was younger, people were teasing him about how he had a villain quirk, and that just came along with him for the rest of his life, even though people in his class, some envy Shinso's quirk actually, but he would never know that because he's so self-centered. But Shinso, he starts talking about how Izuku, he's lucky for getting such a strong quirk, and he is like really boastful because Izuku, he wasn't like very humble about it, but Izuku, he wasn't going around saying, oh, he's stronger than everyone. He just acted that way. So Shinso had a strong dislike towards Izuku, but Izuku couldn't care less really, and he said, bro, I don't care about your sob backstory, let's get to the fight. And Shinso said, you're gonna regret this. And Midnight says, well, we begin. And she starts the fight, and then immediately Shinso tries getting the upper hand on Izuku by running towards him, but just being the first to attack doesn't mean you're going to win. As Shinso got closer to him, Izuku, he teleported behind him and then launched one of his illusions. He can cast illusions to trick his opponents. So Izuku, he casted this illusion of himself that makes him look like All Might, like the All Might build. And it's only that he looks like he isn't actually that strong. And Shinso is like, what the hell? And then he starts backing away, and Izuku starts stepping closer and closer. And then Izuku's body kept on morphing into this monstrous being, so horrifying. It's looked like it's from a nightmare. And Shinso is like, get away from me. And he's forgetting all of what he's planned because Shinso, he tried to come up with a plan to face off against Izuku, but all of that is through the window because he is scared out of his mind. And Izuku said, what's the problem? I thought you were gonna beat me. And Shinso, he's stepping further and further away, not realizing he's getting closer to the edge of the arena, and if he steps out, well, he loses. So Izuku, he keeps scaring Shinso, getting closer and closer, and people in the stands are wondering like what he's so scared about, because to everyone else, Izuku, he's just standing there walking closer to him. They don't see what he's seeing. So Shinso, he is scared of this, and Izuku uses this because he's getting closer to the edge. He just comes in and punches Shinso square in the stomach, and he made sure to amp his physical ability like Izuku. He made sure to amp his physical ability, and this sent Shinso flying out of the ring and left a dent into the arena walls. And people are seeing this and they're like, ooh, that's gotta hurt. So everyone, they cheer for Izuku because, I mean, they don't know why Shinso was backing away, but that was an impressive performance. So they are intrigued for what Izuku has left in store. So Midnight calls the match a win for Izuku, and he returns to the arena while the arena stands, while Recovery Girl has her robots come help out Shinso because he is in pretty bad shape. So the rest of the first rounds goes similar to canon, with Todoroki completely demolishing Zero with a giant ice glacier, and Ibara defeating Denki with her vine hair. And there wasn't really any fight between Tanya and Mei. Mei honestly just used them as a guinea pig to show off her gadgets to the crowd. And this actually caught some of the heroes' attention because they realized that Mei has a lot of technical skills. So even though she comes like dead last in the 1v1s, you know, people have her eyes on her. So after that, it is of course Aoyama versus Mina. Mina absolutely demolishes Aoyama because his sickness he gets from using his powers is way too much. So he's out of here. Then it's Tokoyami versus Momo, and Tokoyami takes the win. And then Kirishima versus Tetsu. And this fight is a draw because their quirks are so similar, it basically cancels each other's out. And a fight that a lot of people were waiting for, Bakugou versus Ochako. And Ochako tried her best in this fight, but Bakugou's quirk is just too destructive and hers is just too non-destructive. Like, it really isn't even an offensive quirk, but Ochako, she gave it her best shot and, she put in a valiant effort, but of course, Bakugou wins. So the tiebreaker between Tetsu and Kirishima is won between an arm wrestling match, and Kirishima takes the win. Now we come to the quarterfinals with Izuku, aka Loki, versus Todoroki. So for this fight, Izuku wanted to make it clear who the strongest in this entire competition was, and that was him. So he started using some of his enhancement sorcery, making himself way stronger, increasing his speed, strength, and stamina to All Might levels. I'm talking Prime All Might. And if you guys know, like, people have tried to scale Prime All Might, it is not gonna be fun for Todoroki. So as soon as the match starts, Izuku starts physically enhancing himself, and this can't be contained in his small stature. So his body starts to grow and resemble Mirio, and Todoroki, he starts shooting a bunch of ice towards Izuku, and as soon as they hit him, they just break on impact because Izuku is that solid. And Todoroki, he's like, what the hell? And Izuku, he completely disappears from everyone's vision, but this time he isn't using teleportation. It's just his raw speed. So Izuku, he runs so fast that he's like out of everyone's vision behind Todoroki, and he punches him, and Todoroki gets sent flying, but he makes an ice wall, catching himself, and he thought he was safe, but Izuku comes through again and punches him in the chest through the ice wall, and this sends him like a rag doll across the entire arena, and people are wondering, what the heck, Izuku, like, what even is he? Is he even human? So Todoroki, he goes flying across the ground, but luckily not out of the ring. And Izuku walks up and says, if you don't use that fire of yours, you're gonna lose this. And Endeavor in the crowd, he's like, what the hell is this kid? Todoroki, get up and fight! Hearing his father's words, scenes from Todoroki's past begin flashing into his mind, and he didn't want to lose, but at the same time he would be giving in to his father's wishes, but he has to win. And then flames started erupting from his body, causing Loki to take a step back and just admire the magnificence of his flames. And then he thought, now this is gonna be a good fight. Todoroki's flames and eyesight began flaring up, and he said to Loki, you wanted this. And both sides shot out attack, and a mass of ice and a majestic flame, both combining to make Todoroki's ultimate technique, which I'm calling Flashpoint. Cementos and Midnight were going to intervene because this seemed way too much for Izuku to even combat against, but he just stood there ready to take the attack. And just at the last minute, Loki put up a force field around his entire body, and Todoroki's attack hit him, and to the crowd, it just blew Izuku away. Like, there's no way he could withstand that. But as soon as the steam and smoke started settling, they saw Izuku still standing there, unfazed, not even any scorch marks or frostbite on him anywhere to be seen. And Todoroki's like, how? And Izuku just smiled and said, because I'm stronger than you, and I always will be. He then rushed Todoroki and punched him right out of the ring, and this didn't send him into the walls, it sent him into the stands where some heroes like caught him, and Todoroki was completely unconscious. So Midnight called Izuku the winner of the match, and people, they didn't even like cheer. They were just amazed at how Izuku managed to survive that move because it seemed like certain death to them. But Izuku somehow pulled it off. So he returns to the stands while Recovery Girl goes and helps out Todoroki. And while that's all said and done, everyone gets a short break, but it doesn't really last long because after Izuku, then goes everyone else in the quarterfinals. Ida beats Ibara because he just speeds off and pushes her out of the edge. Tokoyami beats Mina and Bakugou beats Kirishima. So it comes around to the semi-final rounds, and this would be Tanya versus Todoroki. And this, I'm not even gonna go into this much because this is a clean sweep by Izuku. Izuku would see how much pride Tanya has in his boosting abilities, and he's just gonna show him how he isn't the fastest. So Izuku, he puts up an illusion like he looks like Ida's brother, and Ida, he's confused. He says, Tensei, what are you doing here? And then Izuku says, and he sounds like Tensei, he says, Ida, I'm here to show you how far you have to go. And he says, Tensei, what? And then Tensei, he speeds off at blinding speeds, leaving a smoke trail from the engines in his legs. And he speeds all around Ida, running in a circle, and sometimes coming in and punching him. Imagine like the Flash making a circle around someone and just punching them rapidly, so fast they can't even perceive him. And Ida, he's so overwhelmed, first from the confusion why his brother is even here, and then because he's attacking him. So while Ida is in this state of confusion, Izuku, he would grab his arm and just fling him out of the ring after roughing him up a bit. So Izuku, he would get that win. And after that, it would be Bakugou versus Tokoyami. And Bakugou's immense firepower completely overwhelms Tokoyami, and he takes the win. So now for the fight, everyone in the stands there are waiting for, they're screaming, they're cheering. Izuku versus Bakugou. Now Bakugou, he has been waiting for this. Finally, he can show Izuku how much he has truly grown and finally cement himself as the strongest. Now, both competitors walk into the ring and Midnight says begin. Immediately, Bakugou starts firing a bunch of small explosions from his palms, launching him towards Izuku, and then he comes in and spins around trying to do a spin like leaf hurricane into Izuku's head, but he quickly dodges and actually counterattacks, kicking Bakugou in the chest, and he didn't have nearly enough time to dodge this. So Bakugou, he gets kicked to the ground but quickly gets up because he isn't trying to give Izuku any chances. So they both start the stare down and Bakugou runs at him again, trying to get some sort of blind spot on Izuku. But once he gets close, he just lets a massive explosion out, extending both his palms and releasing it. And this completely blasts Izuku, and he actually wasn't expecting this much firepower, but simply he puts up a force field blocking all of this. And the smoke clears and Izuku, he's completely fine, and it's similar to Todoroki's attack. And Bakugou, he's trying to wonder how Izuku is taking 0 damage from all of these attacks. So Bakugou, he runs up again and starts firing explosion after explosion, and Izuku keeps putting up force fields, and Bakugou still doesn't know why. But while he's doing this, the sky, it starts to turn gray, like a storm is rolling in, and people are wondering what this is. But then light starts emitting from the sky, and then a massive beam of light hits the ground, and this shakes the entire area like an earthquake. And people are scared, they're starting to scream out of fear, and Bakugou and Izuku's fight pauses. And when this light calms down, it's still there, but from it walks out Thanos. Loki, seeing Thanos, quickly turned to run away, but he couldn't move, and he looked down at Thanos' hand and saw the gauntlet with one of the stones glowing. Thanos walked menacingly towards Loki, and he began looking around and said, "So this is where you ended up, huh? Having fun in another world. Well, I've come to get you. My plans haven't gone so smoothly, and I need your expertise." Loki said, "You coming to me for help? Stuff must really have gone bad back home," and he starts smirking. And Thanos said, well, it really isn't a choice. And he grabbed Loki by the neck and started dragging him towards the portal, and Loki still can't move. And Izuku thought someone would try to stop Thanos or something, but he didn't realize it until now. But the world was completely frozen, time stopped completely, and everyone is stuck in place. And his last thoughts in this world was, it was fun, before being thrown into the portal and disappearing, going back to his original Earth, never to be seen again. And that is where I'm going to be leaving this one off. Yeah, that was quite the surprise entry from Thanos, but in all likelihood that would actually happen with Loki out of the picture on Earth. I don't see things going Thanos' way, so sooner or later he would have to come and get him. So if you guys liked it, and if you like my content in general, consider subscribing, and yeah, I'll see you guys in the next What If.